My name is Guy Alberghini. This is a broadcast of the United States Constitution. Each broadcast will cover a very small section of the Constitution, policies that are going against that section of the Constitution, as well as possible solution or solutions. If you just go along with the bad policies, then you agree with them. And if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Hi, welcome back to the broadcast. My name is Guy Alberghini. If you would like to be a guest, email me your name, topic, and your phone number at GLALBERGHINI@gmail.com. And I'll reach out to you and we'll discuss it and try and schedule you in. So as kind of references to today's topic, in April 19th of 1775, there was a battle of Lexington and Concord. Then come March of 1976, Washington was up in the Boston area and we flushed out the British. July 4th of 1776 was the Declaration of Independence. And by the time all the signers signed onto the Declaration of Independence, it was August 2nd of 76. So kind of our Independence Day is August 2nd, and a lot happens in August 2nd, in August, starting with around, the beginning of August through August 27th, which of time of this recording is tomorrow. Okay, so Lynn, you want to take it from there?
Okay, well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on again. Yeah, what we want to discuss, Guy just referenced, we had July 4th, the official starting date of the Declaration of Independence, and then we have sometime over the week of basically between July 8th and through the end of the month, there's a series of celebrations that are going on throughout the still then colonies, nascent American patriot movement, nascent country, and independent country. And we've declared, in the immortal words of the Declaration, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And people flock really to that call. But at the same time, the British are amassing a formidable force, landing in Staten Island, the largest invasionary force, or the largest military force, because they didn't consider it an invasion, it was their territory in their mind, but the largest force that has been assembled, military force, probably in history. They have about 32,000 soldiers, 10,000 sailors, and about a fleet of about 10 major armored naval vessels. So those are huge, firing. They're like, they've got multiple cannons on it and so on. And they're assembling this in off of Staten Island. And the idea is, and this is all happening in July, the idea is to snuff out this nascent revolt, this revolution. So Washington at this point, he's in New York. He doesn't know exactly where the British will hit, but it's suspected that they will hit in New York and that they may attack from Brooklyn, Long Island. On August 27th, so this is just a mere really few weeks after the Declaration of Independence, you have the first major battle of the revolution, or first major battle since the Declaration has been declared, and that's the Battle of Brooklyn, sometimes known as the Battle of Long Island. That happens during that initial revolutionary summer. And I want to tell people the story about that because there's a lot of ironies, and I think a lot that we can gain and a lot that we can learn from this. First of all, the British launch what is in effect a surprise attack. What they do, and if you can envision, and unfortunately we don't really have maps or graphics for this, but envision sort of a little tip of the island, and you have not exactly a peninsula, but an area which on the one side you have land, and on the other side you have the East River. Effectively, what the British do, make a long story short, is they completely encircle on three sides the American forces. And the American forces have their back in that position against Brooklyn Heights and against the East River and against sort of the Sound and going out into the ocean, into the Atlantic Ocean. So if you can just kind of conceptualize that, and maybe later we can insert a picture or something in this so you get more of a graphic assault. So you have a situation where the British are descending and you are about to have a wipeout of the American troops. There's a unit from Maryland, which are gentlemen, as they're described, of honor, family, and fortune. Many of these men are from prominent families. Many of them are plantation owners and so on, but they have pledged their lives, their liberty, and their sacred honor for the cause of liberty. And what happens is that the British are held up in a house, or a large number of them. Actually, General Cornwallis, who people know, fights Washington at Yorktown, and is defeated. General Cornwallis is held up in what's called a stone house, and you have an array of British troops there. What this one battalion, the Maryland grouping under Smallwood, and then a particular unit under Major Gifts, what they do is they conduct a series of very desperate bayonet assaults against the stone house, against this house that Cornwallis is held up in. And you've got it heavily defended. This is something that's virtually impenetrable. It's been built decades earlier to defend the inhabitants of the area from encroachments from Indian, Native American attacks and other attacks. And what they do is they launch a series of very desperate bayonet assaults under point blank fire. There's about 400 of these men that are involved in this, and it is brutal.
Yeah, they were known as the Maryland 400.
Exactly. Their other name is the Immortals, very appropriate because in this assault, there were at least 256 people from this single unit who died, were actually killed on the spot. Many others were actually captured and put on prison ships where many of them died. Most of them died. Um, so the British are firing, they're charging directly into these a shower of grape shot, musket fire, and so on. You literally have people stepping over their fallen comrades and so on. And actually, the attack is so bold, it sort of sets the British back on their heels for a little bit, but they are reinforced and so on. And Washington, who is said to have been watching from a not too far away hill, is has said to have wrung his hands and exclaimed, "My God, brave fellows, must I lose this day?" Uh, so not all was lost, however. These forces, under Major Gist, Smallwood's Maryland forces, were able to hold off the British long enough to save a core of Washington's troops and actually, ultimately, the bulk of Washington's forces. They delayed the British attack against the Patriots. So they were able to go through, they were able to get back to fortifications at Brooklyn Heights. They had the high ground in Brooklyn Heights. They also had a series of trenches and so on beyond the high grounds.
So for today's reference, would Brooklyn Heights be kind of where the Manhattan and Williamsburg Bridge is by the Brooklyn Queens Expressway?
um, It would be a little south, if you know where Park Slopes is. So it would be south of the Williamsburg Bridge. It would actually be closer to the Brooklyn and Manhattan Bridge where they go
Okay.
across. Yeah, yeah. So it's south of that. Um, and in fact, there's a not only a beautiful cemetery, but which is also a historic kind of national monument at Greenwood Cemetery. I was actually there just this past weekend, and they have the hill, which is one of the places of safety that many of the Washington's troops retreated from. And people can go and visit this. They could visit the stone house where Cornwallis was. They can actually take the march from the stone house to where the soldiers advanced and retreated back to the heights. And then what the soldiers did was they had fortifications which were effectively along the river. Now, how at this point, oh, and I should just say that historians have commented that the sacrifice of this Maryland 400, the Immortals, uh, they bought with 1 hour, an hour more precious to American liberty than any in history. It's, you have to see the scene. If they had not been able to escape, if Washington's troops had not had that hour and gotten back to the fortifications, and then General Howe makes the fateful decision because they've been delayed an hour, it's getting later, it's getting dark, nightfall is approaching. His soldiers are tired. The American troops have, in many cases, the patriotic troops, the high ground. They don't want to repeat what Guy had referenced earlier, which is another tremendous a victory, which is actually a stunning loss, which is what they had experienced at Bunker Hill. So, while it was nominally a British victory in the sense that the Patriots retreated, there were so many more British casualties Hal didn't want to try that. So he said, okay, we've got them locked in. They're in these fortifications. Their backs are against the river. I can get my brother, Admiral Richard Howe. He's the commander of the Navy, and they have this huge group there. They'll simply go on there, that surround them, and we can begin a conventional siege. They can't move, they can't come out, or we'll kill them, and they can't get across the river to safety. So what happens at that point is that they withdraw. Washington's troops are captured. They're in a kind of quandary right there, trapped. Washington convenes a battle council of his generals and says, what's next? What should we do? And the opinion is varied, but it's overwhelmingly stating that there's no way that they can retreat in that situation. At that point, what happens is that lightning starts, a huge rainstorm starts, a nor'easter actually begins. The trenches are filling up, both the British as well as the American trenches. People are anywhere from ankle to waist deep in water. Washington makes a command decision that they are going to evacuate. Now, what are you talking about? 9,500 troops, all of their equipment, all of their guns, their ammunition, getting them out at night. So he has to do this in absolute secrecy, because if anybody gets wind of this, of course, the British will attack. So the orders go out. Only a handful of people know what's going on, but the grouping that he depends on, he calls on, are the Marblehead fishermen. And anyone who heard my earlier presentation where I talked a lot about the Marblehead fishermen, but this is the unit under Colonel John Glover, which is a unit that had worked together for many, many years as fishermen. There were also some whalers among them and so on. And this was a group of people who had been distinguished and had come up in their trade, so to speak, by virtue not of their wealth or class or color of their skin or so on, but they were actually had worked together and developed trust on the basis of people who were intelligent, people who were dependable, people who were resilient, and people who could cooperate with other people. So that unit actually was comprised about 1/3 Black Americans, free, or in some cases escaped slaves, but free then, and Native Americans. That's what made up the unit. So fortunately, they were there in the battle, and these guys knew how to navigate the most difficult kind of waters because they had been doing that in the North Atlantic for years. So they commandeered, I don't know how many boats they ended up with. I know initially they only had 10 boats. At about 7 o'clock in the evening, the East River is swirling. There's heavy gusts, heavy currents going in the wrong direction. And I don't think Washington's forces knew it at the time, though the Marblehead fishermen may have had some glimpse of this, that rough weather had actually prevented the Royal Navy from going upstream to be able to get behind the American troops and to block them off. So they're still pretty far away from where the American troops are. They can't block them in. So what happens is that suddenly at 11 o'clock at night, fortuitously, or you might say miraculously, the wind shifts and the water becomes very, very quiet. and the Marblehead fishermen are rowing people back and forth with the boats heavily laden. Apparently, the boats were so stuffed that the gunnies of the boats, the top of the boats, were only about 3 inches above uh, uh, the level of the river, and they're stuffed and they're going back and forth and back and forth and so on, filled to the gills. They're using cloth covered oars to mask the sound of it, to muffle the sound. Later, when it gets even calmer, they're actually much later, about 2 o'clock, they actually get again fortuitously a favorable wind, so they're able to use sails to get across even faster, and they're able to deliver the entire army to safety. The last people to get onto the boats are actually Washington and what remains of this Maryland 400 grouping. And but they do get on. The weather changes again actually at daybreak. I mean, it'd be fun to do a whole program just on Washington's army or the American Revolution, the Continental Army and weather. But the weather changes again at about 6 o'clock in the morning, just at daybreak, and a very, very dense fog settles over the encampment, so dense that people cannot see people 6 feet in front of them. And this again, even though it's now daybreak, like Trenton and the nor'easter storm, it masks the ability of the British military to see them. So this is really a sublime, complex situation. You had over 1,000 men killed or captured. Now, this is just 3 weeks after, bear in mind, or 6 weeks, I guess, about 6 weeks after the Declaration of Independence. You've got, in the case of this Maryland unit, over half of the unit is killed or captured. Yet, when dawn breaks 2 days later, on August 30th, there's a far bigger victory than a loss, because Washington's army has avoided what could have been a complete snuffing out. We could be talking about history today where the Declaration of Independence and the revolution, the nation, was nothing more than just a footnote in British Empire history. But in fact, because of the extraordinary effort above and beyond the call of duty taken by these individuals, the Maryland, and think of the irony here, you have one of the richest groupings in the military, the Maryland 400, who are sacrificing their lives. Most of them, they're annihilated. The unit's decimated. And you have then a further saving of the military by including these Maryland plantation owners in some cases, and others by a group of former slaves and free Blacks and Native Americans. And I think that's extremely significant for us to have a sense of how complex this is. People willing to give their lives for a concept that I cited in the beginning, and for a nation that's not even yet born. So,
Yeah, I couldn't find the number, but a number of the Maryland 400 stayed behind to stop the Hassans and British from advancing, so George Washington and the rest of the Maryland 400 could escape. And a lot of the fighting was brutal hand-to-hand combat and doing what they had to. And one thing I noticed is, I believe it was Jamaica Pass. 10,000 Brits on August 22nd went through Jamaica Pass of Guan Heights. Now, it looks like Guan Heights went from what's known now as Bay Ridge to part of the Greenwood Cemetery. I'm not sure exactly where the pass was. And there was, what did they say, like 9,000, or maybe less than that, American troops going against the Brits.
Oh yeah, they were vastly outnumbered. This was formidable. I mean, this was an auspicious beginning. You're up against the most powerful military force that's ever been assembled. And you have a handful of people. And remember, it's not until much later that the troops are actually really trained. So, you talk about above and beyond the call of duty. And really, the fact that we were all there, I'm talking about all of us, Americans were there, and immigrant Americans. This augurs well for what I think, what our responsibility to maintain or to reestablish the republic, and to make the nation live up to the principles that it was intended to have. That's really our charge.
Okay, so we have a few more minutes left. We could probably do another broadcast sometime in the future. There's so much to cover in such a short amount of time. But it's a
Glad to
25th
do it. I'll
anniversary.
just show people quickly the calendar that I made. Let me just hold that up. The commemorative calendar, Revolution at 250, special commemorative calendar for 2026. And on the back of the calendar, I make the point that this is a world revolution. And you see all the different forces that are involved in it. So there's the calendar, and people can take a look at it.
Yeah, so it's also,
and all the pictures
midterms
are
go
here,
out.
by the way. In here, it has a whole section. August is, now we get into the exciting months. If this can be seen, there's the old stone house, and that's the assault by the Maryland 400th against the house, and you can see they're being fired on point blank. And then there at the bottom, there's John Glover, and there they are going across in the middle of the night on the ships.
Okay, so go out, tell your reps what to do. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Okay, if you just go along with bad policies, then you agree with them. See you next broadcast, Lynn, from Larouche Organization. Okay. Great to see you again.
Okay, thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you very much for watching this broadcast. As it says at the beginning of the preamble, we the people. That's you, that's myself. Are you part of the solution or part of the problem? One way to tell is if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. So call, email, meet with your reps and senators, local leaders, tell them what they should be doing. They govern with the consent of the governed, and if you don't tell them what to do, it's implied that you agree with them and they're doing what you want them to do. So thank you very much again, and look forward to seeing you during the next broadcast.